The release of Street Fighter 6 was a massive success, pulling 1 million sales within a few days compared to Street Fighter 5's 1.4 million in 1 month. It's unquestionable that Capcom fighters have learned from their previous failed fighting game titles by doing what seems to be unthinkable, making a fighting game into a real video game, a proper product, offering players with a rich and vibrant experience in casual and competitive content that works wonders. And while it's not completely perfect, and there are some issues, it has provided a much needed breath of fresh air, and coming from my personal experience, it's truly revitalized my love and enjoyment in fighting games. But at its core, what makes Street Fighter 6 so different from other fighting game releases, and how will this possibly change the industry in a positive way? What truly needs to be understood before we can even talk about the actual features and why it's sold, we must speak upon the will and the power of the consumer. In turn, we must talk about the horrible failure that is Street Fighter 5. Straight up, Street Fighter 5 was a disaster. The game launched with terrible server issues, blocking competitive players, or just anyone that wants to play online really, from even attempting to enjoy the content they were looking for. Not only that, but there's no good casual features. The only thing available was survival mode for players to grind out, but that's not what they were looking for or asked for in the first place. There's no arcade mode to really play that one character you want to play in a casual setting versus a CPU and kind of see their storyline, nor was there actually a story mode just yet, and this a promise that a story mode would be coming in the future. The game was rushed. It was rushed out of the gates largely for the Capcom tour and for the competitive scene, but let everyone else to dry, the people that actually matter in this aspect. Without a casual fan base, there will be no competitive fan base. And what makes it worse is that the PvP content itself was riddled with issues. The netcode was worked on by one individual to my understanding, causing several problems when attempting to play the game online. What's actually funny about this, as a side note, is that a few years into the lifespan of Street Fighter 5, someone made a fix to the netcode for its PC online. However, Capcom patched it out so you couldn't actually enjoy the PvP experience. Is ridiculous to me. All this really did was enforce this very jittery and jarring experience, making it difficult to enjoy even for the most hardcore fans. Mixing with the gameplay's core mechanics and direction, many players were ultimately turned off by what was this pathetic excuse for a product. When coupled with the failures of Cross Tekken, which, side note, I really like Cross Tekken, and later Marvel's Capcom Infinite, Capcom's fall from grace was a terrible sight to be seen. Once known as the saviors of the FGC due to its popular release of Street Fighter 4, which to my knowledge really rejuvenated Western fighting game scene, they were now considered failures, and the consumer looked for newer and, well, better options. This era of the FGC was actually quite interesting to think about in hindsight, as players would just want to play anything that just wasn't Street Fighter, which wasn't too common. We had more players than ever playing anime fighters, anything like Under Night or Melty Blood, French Bread, Guilty Gear, Blaze Blue, maybe some things that look kind of anime-ish, like Skullgirls, Tekken, or 3D fighters, or just NRS games, and well, what else is there in FGC? In all the way, the failure of Street Fighter helped the FGC more than really hurt it by encouraging players to explore different ideas and styles of gameplay. So how's this connected to Street Fighter 6? Without really rambling more about Street Fighter 5 and all the other things I kind of despise and many other players do. With how players abandoned their previous title, or the people that kept up with 5 envied the other games and their accomplishments, Street Fighter 6 will in its own way do the same. Street Fighter has always indicated a new era in the FGC, a dawn to a new beginning, a new chapter for all players to experience. And with this, they are coming out of the gates swinging, with working features beaming with personality. From the bare minimum you should expect from a fighting game being a proper training mode, and actually a really detailed one, which is so nice, good online play and fun experiences, to maybe some clans and customization, to what is so important, which is a proper rank system and working lobbies. And let's not forget that this game isn't afraid to take itself too seriously. From the abominations that people call avatars, these freaks in nature walking around these lobbies, extreme battle mode, which allows you to play some like goofy type of party game modes, and the World Tour, which is just a really fun and vibrant experience in its own unique way. And while the story isn't particularly anything special in the World Tour mode, it's quite nice to kind of like see all these other characters you've played in the video game, or just have this little fun beat 'em up moment fighting pedestrians on the street. It's wild to me. It has provided us a fun way to approach and enjoy the game, which normally doesn't really happen outside NRS Fighters. Usually a lot of these other fighting games may have a arcade mode, may have a survival mode, but really doesn't go much further than that while charging you full price. But what's important to note is that for a Japanese company to be willing to make such large scale changes to their approach and commit to these changes, it just isn't that common. Usually they will stick to the same rigid approach that's worked for years and years and years, which is why you still get like dumb quotes like the KOF quote saying that delay-based netcode is technically just as fine or even better than rollback for people within Japan, but overseas fans, they just really like rollback netcode for some goofy fun reason. And not only that, but the KOF matchmaking still doesn't work, so so at the end of the day, it does, for all things considered, make me hopeful. And before I can continue further with this cold discussion, I have to discuss about the gameplay. This gameplay is tight. This game is so sick. While Street Fighter is ultimately a slower and more grounded fighter, there's so much room for combo expressions, your playstyle to really pop out, and just access so many fun and interesting tools. And while they have continued with the trend of minimizing plus frames, because that's quite common in modern fighters nowadays, they have found great ways to empower players to enable their characters with the cost of vital resources. And instead of stripping away tools and locking them behind certain mechanics, kind of like V-trigger and V-skills, they offer players to manage their resources and add plenty of new and exciting tools to express themselves. No more silly like comeback mechanics to suddenly turn a game in a style of game that doesn't really need it. You have to use your own fundamentals and skills to really make that comeback happen, which I think is fantastic, and they give you all the tools to do so. Even characters that I personally dislike, like Cammy, due to what I perceive it to be a boring kit. Please don't hurt me, Cammy fans, I'm begging you. She looks so much more interesting. Visually, the game is fantastic, with some janky normals or positions, so I'm looking at you, Chun-Li. But overall, a great time. The sound direction to this game, personally, I think is fantastic. That's actually a really big aspect for me personally. I love the aesthetic of the game. The music's I feel like I've heard better, but I also like Strive music, and a lot of people don't like Strive music, so take my opinion, as an opinion. And honestly, I still think, as I said earlier, that in the World Tour, being able to see these legends and interact with them, text them, whatever, I think it's just a fantastic experience, and it makes the game so much more fun and so much more interesting in its own right, aside just the competitive aspect of the video game. And while I could honestly talk more about this fighting game and go for more of a deep dive of how I think about the drive system and its mechanics and the interesting aspects to it, that'll have to be for a different video. So let's talk about something just as important, which is Capcom has created a new standard for fighting game players everywhere. Just like Street Fighter V's failure caused a migration, the Street Fighter 6 improvements and success should have us questioning releases in the future. Many fighting games released over the last few years have only required one aspect: rollback netcode, especially during the pandemic, where people can even go to locals if they wanted to, but that should never have been a requirement in the first place to play fighting games. Everything else has come second, since fighting game players are just so desperate for a functioning product that works online. And even then, many of these titles were just riddled with issues. Guilty Gear Strive is a great example of this issue. Now, just as an FYI, I still love this game. I love Strive so much. I think it's so much fun. It's actually probably one of my favorite fighting games. I've been playing fighting games either casually or a little bit more than that since Mortal Kombat 9. But the Guilty Gear makes it hard to love. Consistent connection issues, an awful lobby system, and basically nothing else to do outside the PvP content for a fully priced game. And while fighting game players are used to these issues, no other genre deals with these problems. If I want to boot up a game like Valorant, which I don't, I can literally launch the game, press play, and just start gaming as soon as the queue finishes. And due to the population of the game, it's not going to be too hard to get a queue. There have been plenty of times where I have taken 20 minutes to finally just load into heaven just to play somebody, and oftentimes I still have to sit on the cabinet and hope that the cabinet doesn't crash me, something silly like that, and then get into the game. And when I'm in a game, the gameplay is great. I think it's super fun. The netcode feels fantastic, but it can take so long to get to that point. It is a horrendous excuse for a product, for a package that people are paying full money for on release. This should never have been considered acceptable, nor the standard. And to be honest, it never was acceptable. The fighting game players are desperate. Rollback alone should not be the standard for a fully priced game, and Street Fighter 6 should be seen as the current and new standard players look towards. And while there, I'm sure, someone that can be very critical about Street Fighter 6 could point out the things that it still needs and the improvements it still has to go through. This is the current standard we should be looking for from games like Street Fighter 6 or NRS titles that come out in the future. And with these new fighting games on the horizon, just like the NRS as I mentioned with Mortal Kombat 1, we should be concerned and careful. And while I actually am not that concerned about NRS, this due to their track record in the MK11, and I believe MK10 was pretty solid, didn't launch with rollback at start, but you know, it is what it is. When it comes to other games, especially with Tekken, where Harada seems to be pretty confident their netcode is fine already, I would be concerned and place your money wisely. The consumer must decide what's worth their time and their money. No more bad netcode, no more terrible training modes or paying for frame data or lack of offline features. We must value our time, value our money, and decide with our wallets if a product is worth buying. And in my humble little opinion on this space of the internet, this void that I'm in, I think Street Fighter 6 is a fantastic product. Anyway, what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments how you feel about Street Fighter 6. If anyone comments on this and what you may be interested in considering what I've talked about before. And I'll see you next time. Consider a like if you liked the video, comment as I said before, and consider subbing as well. Also, I've been streaming a lot on Twitch recently due to Street Fighter 6 release, and it's been a ton of fun. I'm playing a lot of Lily. Thanks so much for watching. This has been BitHitta. Peace.